Everyone, and welcome to the December 2024 Ordinary Council meeting. We acknowledge and pay our respects to the traditional custodians of this land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and their elders past and present. I would like to advise everyone that the audio and video of this meeting is being live streamed to YouTube. I request everyone to please turn off your mobile phones. I remind you that any recording of the meeting proceedings and photography within the chamber is prohibited unless prior approval has been granted, and councillors and city officers are reminded to disclose any declarations of financial interests and interests affecting impartiality, and are requested to activate their microphones when addressing the meeting. So, with that, we move to item 1, which is the declaration of opening. Welcome everyone. I declare this meeting open at 6 p.m. Attendance by electronic means. Councillor Mary Choi has requested to attend tonight's meeting via telephone in accordance with Regulation 14C and 14C of the Local Government Administration Regulations 1996. I've authorised Councillor Choi to attend the meeting by electronic means. Councillor Mary Choi, in accordance with Regulation 14C Sub-Regulation 5 of the Local Government Administration Regulations 1996, can you maintain confidentiality during the meeting and when the meeting goes behind closed doors?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Choi. That brings us to item 2, which is a disclaimer. The City of South Perth disclaims any liability for any loss arising from any person or body relying on any statement, discussion, recommendation or decision made during the meeting. Item 3 is the announcements from the presiding member, and tonight is the second of the reports being presented by me following Council's request at the October Ordinary Council meeting for a monthly report on the engagements and meetings attended by me in my capacity as Mayor since the previous Council meeting. Bear with me, I'm fighting off a summer cold this evening, so please be kind. Like last month, the first part of the report is going to be the requested summary of events and the meetings that I've attended, and the second part of the report will be the requested overview of key issues, initiatives and matters that I've been addressing in my capacity as Mayor since the last Council meeting. The November Ordinary Council meeting was held on Tuesday the 19th of November, so I'll kick off on the first part of the report starting from Thursday the 21st of November. It's only been 3 weeks since the last report, but there's still a reasonable amount to report, so here goes. Thursday the 21st of November, I started the day with a visit to Veeam's manufacturing facilities along with another attendees, including Lord Mayor Basil Zemplis. Veeam is a manufacturer of high-technology marine propulsion and stabilisation systems who export across the globe from their base in Canning Vale. At 10:30 a.m, I then attended an information session morning tea at Collier Park Village with Amana Living and Councillor Jennifer Navard. As some of you know, I've been attending Collier Park Village on a semi-regular basis over the last 6 years to stay in touch with the residents and give them an opportunity to ask any questions that they might have of me. Councillor Navard and I formed part of a panel convened by Amana to present information on various topics of interest to residents. I brought the residents up to speed on the various all-ages events taking place in the City of South Perth over the summer and answered a range of questions. We then joined the residents for a morning tea. Also on Thursday the 21st of November at 4 p.m, I headed over to the Godwin Avenue sump in Manning for the formal opening of what we've called the Godwin Avenue sump upgrade. But if I'm being honest, I'm not sure that name really does the project justice. Instead of upgrading a stormwater drainage sump, the city teamed up with the Water Corporation and with RACWA to transform the surrounding area into a beautiful, vibrant parklet for our community. For those of you who haven't had a chance to check it out yet, this wonderful collaboration has reimagined what was once just a functional stormwater site, turning it into a vibrant environmentally friendly community hub. A new biofiltration system is improving the quality of the stormwater entering the sump, significantly reducing pollutants and excess nutrients. and this helps protect our local waterways, preserving the health of our environment for future generations. We've also mulched and revegetated natural areas and have added bird watering stations, insect hotels, a bird and microbat, actually several bird and microbat nesting boxes, providing a safe haven for local wildlife and enriching the biodiversity in the area. Finally, we've added a little something for local families by including a nature play zone, a grass and rest area with a range of seating options and a wheelchair parking pad for accessibility. When you combine that with the upgrade works that we've done on transport connections that link to the nearby train station, local schools and Curtin University, we've got a significantly upgraded area in our community. So I've added some photos of the results in my Merrill Facebook page. It really does look a treat, significantly improving the local amenity for nearby residents. Moving on to Friday the 22nd of November at 7:30am, I attended a meeting of the Rotary Club of Mill Point. For those of you who aren't aware, I'm an honorary member of the Rotary Club of Mill Point, and during the course of the meeting we received a report about Rotary's recent Bullduston Back event. The Bullduston Back Car Trial is a not-for-profit 4-day motoring and navigation adventure that leads drivers in beautifully decorated cars throughout WA's southwest, raising money primarily for local children's cancer and youth mental health charities. Over the last 5 years, the club has raised over $515,000 for beneficiaries, including Kids Cancer Support Group, Kids Cancer Project supporting kids cancer research, RFDSWA, Global Hand, Bicycles for Humanity, and Australian Rotary Health for research into children's mental health. In addition, over $200,000 went into the regional communities that the club visited en route. So on behalf of the City of South Perth, I'd like to commend the Rotary Club of Mill Point for the tremendous work they do for so many worthy causes. Saturday the 23rd of November, in the morning I attended the 44th Australian Infantry Battalion Memorial at Perth War Cemetery. I served as an honour roll ensign and laid a wreath on behalf of the city to symbolise our community remembering and commemorating the sacrifices made by those who served in the battalion. The 44th local battalion was, the 44th unit that fought in World War I and suffered 437 soldiers killed, some of whom were from the South Perth area. Monday, 25 November at 3pm, I met with the city's CEO and the city's communications team. As you all know, I meet with the city's CEO and the city's communication team once per week to discuss current and upcoming communications by the city, potential third-party media relevant to the city, and my duties as spokesperson for the city. Tuesday, 26 November, at 6pm, I attended the St Columba's Catholic Primary School Year 6 Mass and Graduation held at St Columba Church in South Perth. I had the privilege of helping to present some awards to some outstanding students, as well as helping to congratulate the students upon their graduation. Wednesday, 27 November. On Wednesday, the 27th of November, I caught up with the president of the South Perth United Football Club, Sony Sin. As many of you know, I try to make myself available to the various sporting clubs and organisations in our city to understand their needs better and to gain a perspective on what the city might be able to do to help make our district a better place to work, live and play. I received an update on the continuing growth of the South Perth United Football Club, the current facilities at Challenger Reserve, and what the club would like to see in the future. Thursday, 28th of November. At 9am, I attended the Aquinas College Junior School presentation, and as with the St Columba's Catholic Primary School Year 6 graduation, I had the privilege of helping to present some awards to some very worthy students and congratulating them on their achievements. At 12:30, I caught up with Patrick Hall, the Mayor of Canning, for lunch at local business Pins Palace. I think I mentioned at last month's meeting that I try and catch up with the mayors of neighbouring local governments or local governments that the city shares strategic interests with every so often. We talked about a range of topics, including planning reforms, electoral reforms, tree canopy, our respective budgets, Christmas carols, meeting procedures, and the similarities and common interests between our neighbouring cities. We also got to meet the very friendly owners of the restaurant, who were very nice. At 5:30pm, I attended the Como Secondary School Arts Twilight Showcase at Como Secondary School. I was amazed by the quality of the artworks on display, several pieces of which featured in the city's Emerging Artists Award exhibition earlier this year. It's a credit to the arts program at Como Secondary School and to the very talented students participating in it. At 7 o'clock, I attended the Aquinas College Middle School presentation evening. The evening was held under the clear twilight sky at Aquinas College. Once again, was proud to help present awards to some extraordinary students and congratulating them on their achievements. Saturday, 30 November, at 3:45pm, I joined Bruce Welsh for a chat on 6PR Radio about the city's Carols at Sunset event. I very much enjoy going on to 6PR to talk about what's going on in the city, and I had the opportunity to let people know about what was on offer at the Carols and the great causes that our partners, the Lions Club of South Perth, are supporting with the donations received at the Carols, but more on that when I get to last Sunday on this report. Sunday the 1st of December at 2pm, my wife Belinda and I attended a performance of Picnic at Hanging Rock at the Old Mill Theatre. I was invited to do so by, in my capacity as mayor, by the Old Mill. The Old Mill operates out of one of the most historic buildings in South Perth. It was, as some of you may know, it was opened in 1899 as a Mechanics Institute Hall. The City of South Perth bought the building in 1913 and renamed it the Men's Street Hall. We still own the building and support the ongoing use of it, and rededicating it formally to the Old Mill Theatre in 2009. For those of you that are interested, the acting was sensational and Belinda and I very much enjoyed the performance. Monday 2 December. At 9am on Monday 2 December, Councillor Jennifer Navard, Councillor Hayley Prendeville, CEO Mike Bradford and Manager Con Angelides and I attended a Cleanaway Material Recovery Facility tour at Cleanaway's Material Recovery Facility in Guildford. The tour was a great opportunity for elected members to gain an appreciation of the challenges and opportunities in the waste management space and how we might be able to help educate our community about what can and what can't be recycled. So on behalf of the city, I thank Cleanaway for making that opportunity available to elected members. At 12 noon on the same day, I met with residents Mal Dempsey and Nick Tana at local business, I hope I pronounce it right, Dolce and Salato, to discuss a range of issues, including hooning on the South Perth foreshore. At 3pm on the same day, I met with the city's CEO and the city's communication team for our weekly comms teams meeting. Tuesday, the 3rd of December, 10am. On Tuesday, 3rd of December, I met with the city CEO as part of our ongoing weekly meetings. As you all know, I meet with the CEO at least once a week to discuss the local government's affairs and the performance of its functions in line with Section 2.8 of the Local Government Act. And then same day, 6pm, I presided over last week's council agenda briefing, and since most of you were here, I probably don't have to go into details on that one. Wednesday, the 4th of December, at 9am, I met with Tony Brown from the Western Australian Local Government Association. I catch up with representatives of the sector and with the sector regulators from time to time, and on this occasion, Mr Brown and I discussed a range of legislative, governance and professional development matters, among other matters. At 10:30, I attended the Penrose College Junior School Speech Day Awards. Always a sensational event. Once again, had the privilege of helping to present some awards to some very talented and very worthy young ladies and congratulating them on their achievements. And I then returned to Penrose College at 1:30pm on the same day for the secondary school speech day. Attendees were treated to some outstanding musical performances from the very talented students, and I had the pleasure of handing out some more awards to some very worthy winners. Thursday, the 5th of December, 9am, was the Collier Primary School Year 6 graduation. I had the pleasure of presenting the Community Service Award to a very worthy winner and congratulating the graduating students. 6pm, I attended the Art of Real Estate Christmas celebration at their premises and Mill Point Road in South Perth. The Art of Real Estate is a local real estate business headed up by Karen Firth and Jack Fear, and it was a genuine pleasure to see so many members of our local community in attendance. Friday the 6th of December. At 10am, I met with the president of the Como Bowling Club and former member for South Perth, John McGrath. As I mentioned earlier, I try and make myself available to the various sporting clubs and community organisations in our city to understand their needs and gain a perspective on what we might be able to do to help them in their endeavours. Mr McGrath and I met at the local business, the Ducks Cafe, and talked about a range of issues relating to the Como Bowling Club and to the City of South Perth. At 5 p.m, my family and I attended the Manning Men's Shed Christmas party. It's been an absolute pleasure to watch the growth of the Men's Shed during the years that I've served as Mayor, and they really do an amazing amount of work to benefit the local community. I got to watch the demonstration of the 3D printer they've got at the shed now, which was very cool. Once again, thank you to the Men's Shed for inviting my family and I. It was a pleasure to attend. Sunday the 8th of December, 5 p.m, was the South Perth Bridge Club Christmas party. So my family and I attended the South Perth Bridge Club Christmas party in Barker Road in Como. Really nice to see the members there, but we couldn't stay long because at 6 p.m, we were due at Carols at Sunset. So we headed up to the South Perth foreshore for the city's Carols by Sunset event, hosted in partnership with the Lions Club of South Perth. For those of you who were there, it was a tremendous evening. Those of you who weren't there as well, it was still a tremendous evening. I think we might have had a record crowd on Sunday, so that's great. We had the Lions big band playing carols, and we had our young artisans and entrepreneurs selling Christmas-themed crafts at the Youth Makers Market. The Salter Point Sea Scouts were out in force collecting donations for Lions, who are supporting a very worthy range of organisations, including Beyond Blue, Heart Kids WA, South Care and Food Bank. Thank you to everyone who attended, and on behalf of the city, we all hope you had a really amazing evening. Nearly there. Monday, 9th of December at 9 a.m, I attended the Globe Cafe and Restaurant in Angelo Street, South Perth for the Alzheimer's WA Memory Cafe. Alzheimer's WA partners with local businesses like the Globe Cafe to host a memory cafe every Monday morning. The Memory Cafe provides resources and support for caregivers and valuable respite services for individuals to help carers navigate the challenges of caring for their loved ones living with dementia. The Globe Cafe has been hosting the Memory Cafe in our region every week for, I think it's about 5 years now, and it's just one more way that our wonderful business community pitches in to help create a vibrant, welcoming and inclusive community for everyone. At 10 a.m, speaking of local businesses that do a lot for our local community, my next stop was the Carolee on Preston for the annual Seniors Morning Tea. Pierre Sakira and his team from Preston Street IGA and the Carolee on Preston. The morning tea was very well attended, and we were treated to a wonderful selection of Christmas carols from the very talented and always friendly Take Note Choir. It's always a pleasure to catch up with members of our local community, and I thank Pierre Sakira and his team for hosting the annual Seniors Morning Tea once again. 2 p.m. on Monday the 9th of December, I attended a meeting with Director Donna Shaw and with Dan Crystal and Hayden Crystal of The Raft. Dan Crystal and Hayden Crystal had some exciting ideas in response to Council's motion about a floating restaurant at the October Ordinary Council meeting, and I very much appreciated the opportunity to hear those ideas firsthand. At 3 p.m. on the same day, I met with the City CEO and the City's communication team for our weekly comms team meeting, and that brings us to Tuesday the 10th of December, which is today. So at 10 a.m, I had my regular weekly meeting with the City CEO, and that, I think, brings us all up to date. As for the second part of the report, that's the requested overview of the key issues, initiatives and matters that I've been addressing in my capacity as Mayor since the last council meeting. Like last month, you're all aware of this one, but the main issue that I've been working on since the last council meeting is once again how elected members can work better with each other and with the city administration to deliver on our community's priorities. Okay, thank you for bearing with me on that one. That brings us to item 4, which is attendances. Item 4.1 is apologies. I've received an apology from Councillor Bronwyn Wall for this evening. Item 4.2 is approved leaves of absence. Councillor Glenn Cridland has an approved leave of absence for the period of 27 November 2024 to 13 December 2024 inclusive, but he's here with us tonight. And Councillor Mary Choi has an approved leave of absence for the period of 4 December 2024 to 19 January 2025 inclusive, but she's here with us tonight, albeit remotely. Item 5 is the declarations of interest. There's a few of these, so once again, please bear with me. Mayor Greg Milner, that's me. I've declared an impartiality interest in item 10.1.1 as over the years I've developed positive working relationships with many local sporting organisations and community clubs that might potentially be affected by or have an interest in this item. I've also declared a financial and proximity interest in item 10.1.3 as this item potentially involves the development of land that is adjacent to or is across the road from properties that are owned or indirectly owned by persons who contributed to my re-election campaign in 2023. This could potentially result in a financial gain, loss, benefit or detriment for those persons. I've also declared a financial and proximity interest in item 10.3.1 as some of the proposed listings either include or are adjacent to or are across the road from properties that are owned or indirectly owned by persons who contributed to my re-election campaign in 2023. Councillor Andre Brendera-Brandis has declared an impartiality interest in item 10.3.1 as I know someone who is not a closely associated person to me and their property is on the Heritage Survey. Councillor Hayley Prendeville has declared an impartiality interest in item 10.3.1 as I was a guest at a dinner at Wesley College a few months ago and my children attend Kensington Primary School, locations both featured on the Heritage Survey review. Councillor Mary Choi has declared an impartiality interest in item 10.3.1 as some of the heritage places listed in the draft local heritage survey for advertising are known to me by past or present association, and some of the landowners, associates or residents of some of the heritage places listed in the draft local heritage survey for advertising are or may also have been known to me. My sons also attend Wesley College and my husband is a Wesley College old boy. Councillor Bronwyn Moore has declared an impartiality interest in item 10.3.1 as my son attends Wesley College. Councillor Glenn Cridland has declared an impartiality interest in item 10.3.1 as I know owners of property on it. Councillor Hayley Prendeville has declared an impartiality interest in item 10.3.2 as I have a family member who is a member of the Collier Pines Ladies Golf Club. Councillor Bronwyn Moore has declared an impartiality interest in item 10.3.5 as I know the owners of that property, although they are not closely associated persons. Councillor Mary Choi has declared an impartiality interest in item 10.3.7 as some landowners or residents who may have a significant view as defined in the policy may be known to me. And Councillor Nick Coveney has declared an impartiality interest in item 10.3.7 as some residents whose views may be impacted are known to me. Councillors, does anyone else have an interest that they wish to declare this evening? Councillor Choi?
No, that's all. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. I'm going to take that as being a no for that question from Council generally. Item 6 is public question time. Item 6.1 is responses to previous public questions taken on notice. That's nil. Item 6.2 is public question time. And I now open public question time at 6:23 p.m. We have received 4 written submissions prior to tonight's meeting. So I'd like to begin by inviting Dr. Mark Brogan of Kensington. Welcome to you, if you'd like to come to the microphone, and we look forward to your questions.
Good evening, Mayor, councillors and members of the City of South Perth staff. Unfortunately, my voice is also affected by what I presume and hope to be a summer cold. So if it disappears, no doubt that will cause some degree of relief to councillors present, but it will be unfortunate. My questions this evening relate to the Local Heritage Survey and underground power in Kensington. Some preamble to the first of my questions which concerns the Local Heritage Survey. At the agenda briefing meeting of 3 December 2024, there was evident confusion in the minds of some councillors about processes and outcomes associated with the Local Heritage Survey and amendment of the Heritage List. This was particularly true of heritage areas and local planning policies that might be used to control development in designated heritage areas. In respect of the community, confusion and some degree of misinformation is also apparent on the implications of listing for property values. Heritage classification generally does not lower property value and in some cases can even improve it. So to the first of my questions. To assist with a full and proper understanding of listing and its implications, and if the local heritage survey is approved for advertising, will the City arrange a community workshop for stakeholders to explain the heritage survey, the heritage list and related processes, such as those concerning areas and local planning policies?
Thank you for the question. Ms Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So the City can undertake a drop-in session for community members and will prepare detailed FAQs on the local heritage framework review process. Offers are also available during business hours to discuss matters pertaining to the review and heritage in general.
Thank you, Ms Shaw.
Thank you. To my second question, which also concerns the LHS. At Council's agenda briefing meeting of 17 September 2024, Council heard a large number of deputations relating to a notice of motion regarding options by the Wasps Hockey Club to lease sports spaces in Collier Reserve. It was something of a bear pit. In the wash-up, a deputation by Heritage Architect, award-winning Heritage Architect, and Vice President of the Art Deco and Modernist Society, Mr Philip McAllister, was not heard. He had to leave. The deputation was in support of Councillor Andre Brender-Abrandis' notice of motion number 12.1, RE, Council meeting of the 24th September 2024, in relation to the contracting of an external heritage consultant to review the LHS assessments and classification recommendations. Philip's deputation addressed three elements of normative good practice in the conduct of heritage surveys, which are potentially missing from the current City of South Perth local heritage survey process. These are 1, failure to employ external consultants, 2, inclusion of Category 3 places in the heritage list, and thirdly, responsibility for owner consultation. There has clearly been, in my view, a process failure in relation to the hearing of Mr McAllister's deputation. Will Council invite him back to give this deputation as originally envisaged, or publish specific responses in relation to the good practices he has identified with which City of South Perth is potentially non-compliant?
Thank you for the question. Ms Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr McAllister withdrew the deputation on the night, and it was instead circulated to all elected members ahead of the ordinary council meeting, along with information on the local heritage survey review and process.
Okay. My last question concerns the hoary old chestnut of underground power in Kensington, which I'm sure many of the councillors are familiar with. Kensington is the last suburb in South Perth to be considered for underground power, more than a quarter century after the first underground power came to South Perth. Quarter of a century. Deadlines for receipt of the draft funding agreement and council deliberation on the agreement come and go with no finalisation or apparent accountability. The 11 September 2024 Kensington Underground Power Update refers to receipt of the draft in October 2024, with fee structure deliberation as part of the 2025-26 annual budget deliberations. Will the City again provide an update on project milestones and schedules as of the 10th of December 2024?
Thank you for the question. Ms Amprimo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The City continues to liaise with Western Power on the progress of this project. The most up-to-date estimate for works to commence on site, according to Western Power, is in the third quarter of 2025, noting that this is contingent on final council endorsement of the project and resulting levy.
Thank you, Ms Amprimo, and thank you, Mr Brogan, for the questions. Sorry, Dr Brogan, for the questions.
Thank you, Mayor.
I'd now like to invite Ms Kay Poe of Como. If you'd like to come to the microphone, welcome to you, and we look forward to your questions.
Good evening, everyone. The black cockatoos have had an unprecedented and devastating year due to Perth's record-breaking summer. This extreme heat destroyed their food sources and caused mass starvation, as seen in the influx of distressed, underweight birds at rehabilitation centres and the Perth Zoo. These conditions have also severely impacted this year's breeding season. With our urgent action from local and state governments, experts warn that all three species could face extinction within the next 2 decades. As you are aware, Collier Park Golf Course has been identified as one of the largest and most important roosting sites for Carnaby's black cockatoos in the metropolitan area. The remnant pine trees not only provide vital roosting sites, but also a crucial food source for these birds. Given the importance of preserving these trees, it is reassuring to note that the city has prioritised retaining all the pine trees on site and has made several revisions to the design concepts for the golf redevelopment to ensure their preservation. Question 1. At a UGS public engagement event, I was encouraged to hear from a city officer that new pine trees have been planted at the golf course. Can the city provide details on how many have been planted so far and how many more are planned?
Thank you for the question. Ms Ampremo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Since 2018, the city has planted a total of 661 new trees at Collier Park Golf Course. 140 have been Pinus radiata. In addition to the pines, the city has also planted trees that are other sources of food for the black cockatoos. Future plantings will be dependent on what species we have available and also what comes out of the urban forest urban greening review.
Thank you. Question 2. It is understood that the proposed golf course redevelopment will include a 2-storey driving range and other multi-use facilities. Will the city consult with black cockatoo experts during the design process to address concerns such as light pollution from extended nighttime operations in order to mitigate any potential impact on the roosting habitat?
Thank you. Mr Adams.
So it's proposed that the driving range will make use of the existing floodlights and will only operate for a maximum of an additional 2 hours per day. The impact of this on black cockatoos was previously considered as part of the site selection during the RAF planning process. But obviously, as we progress further with designs, we'll seek more input from experts in that area. And also into some of the other areas of design as well.
Thank you. Question 3. Could the city outline the additional measures that will be implemented to ensure this development proceeds as planned, delivering an enhanced community recreational space while minimising any significant harm to the endangered black cockatoos?
Thank you. Mr Adams.
Yeah, so as per my previous response, as we progress through the detailed design process, consultation with various groups and experts will take place to ensure that the designs and operations achieve the desired outcomes without adversely impacting on the environment. And as you mentioned in your preamble, we've noted in the report before Council tonight that all trees on site are being retained. And in fact, we've made some significant changes to the original concept plans to ensure that the large trees closest to the proposed development will not suffer any adverse impacts.
Thank you, Mr Adams, and thank you, Ms Poe, for the questions.
Thank you.
I would now like to invite Mr Barry Drake of South Perth. If you'd like to come to the microphone, welcome to you, and we look forward to your questions.
My name's Barry Drake. I live at Unit 3, Number 2, Scenic Crescent, South Perth. Good evening, Mr Mayor. Good evening, councillors, officers. Good evening, members of the gallery and everybody out there listening on YouTube. Good evening. My questions this evening, tonight, are about the sporting facilities the city is trying to, or intending, or planning to build on Sir James Mitchell Park, so the Wesley College can relocate their sporting activities
Mr Drake.
to Sir James Mitchell Park.
No suggestions that aren't supported by fact. Just proceed to your questions, please.
Everybody else had a preamble.
Yes, but
Short
yours are
preamble.
routinely incorrect and not rooted in fact, so please proceed to your questions.
Question number 1. If the elected members of the City of South Perth decide to allow sporting facilities to be built on Sir James Mitchell Park, who will pay for this?
Thank you for the question. Ms Shaw?
Thank you. Should the land at Elm Street be deemed suitable from a geotechnical perspective for development as sports spaces, Council will need to determine whether it seeks to develop the site for this purpose in the first instance, before deciding if and how it would fund such development. Funding sources could include municipal funds, grant funding and private investment.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Your second question, Mr Drake?
the private investment.
No,
Can you
Mr Drake, there's no argument with the city officers. We've been through this any number of times
all
at
right,
previous meetings.
probably
Please
with
proceed
college.
to your second question.
Question number 2. What would stop the elected members of the City of South Perth selling all or part of Sir James Mitchell Park to a developer in the same way as they sold the Civic Triangle, and that's the piece of land bounded by Men Street, Mill Point Road and Lavisher Road?
Thank you for the question. Ms Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The land is reserved for parks and recreation under the local planning scheme and the Metropolitan Region scheme and cannot be developed for residential development. Rezoning would require Minister for Planning approval. The land is also within the Swan Development Control Area and Minister for Environment approval would be required for any development. The majority of Sir James Mitchell Park is also Crown land, so owned by the King, and Council does not own and cannot dispose of Crown land.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. And your final question, Mr Drake?
One of my answers last week was that Council
Mr Drake,
Sir James
I will turn off your microphone.
Question
Please
number
proceed
3.
to question number 3.
Question
Thank
number
you.
3. Will the City of South Perth consult with the West Australian public before building sporting structures on the park and not just the residents of the City of South Perth?
Thank you for the question. Ms Shaw?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. No, given the City does not determine development applications on Sir James Mitchell Park, as it is within the Swan Development Control Area. Development applications within the Swan Development Control Area require public consultation undertaken by the Department of Biodiversity, Conservation and Attractions, which is open to all members of the public before being determined by the Minister for Environment.
Thank you, Ms Shaw, and thank you, Mr Drake, for the questions.
Thank you. Thank you.
I would now like to invite Mr John Bassett of Como. If you'd like to come to the microphone, welcome to you, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Ms Shaw, thank you last week for the clarification on the process and procedure for the heritage listing, listings which are being proposed for today. It was illuminating, but by the end of the discussion, I was bewildered by a statement made by you and later by Mr Bradford that said that there are currently no heritage protections at present. That doesn't sort of fit with my understanding, where we see that we're looking at proposed listings which are in addition to current listings. Those current listings are stated on the council website, where it lists 17 places as listed as Category A, and with the statement that Category A listings are to be recommended for inclusion on the State Register of Heritage Places. Now, that was in 2018. Could you clarify the situation in relation to this?
Thank you for the question. Ms Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Heritage protection only exists for properties listed on the State Register. The state database, which is Inherit, shows that there are only 20 listings within South Perth on the State Register. Following gazettal of Local Planning Scheme number 7, there are no supplemental provisions for heritage, and therefore until such time Council adopts a heritage list under the Planning and Development Local Planning Schemes Regulations 2015, it will have no heritage list or local heritage protection other than those properties already contained on the State Register. So there is state protection, there is no local protection.
Okay, thank you. Second question. At the August 27th meeting, I requested an update on the progress of council tree planting strategy. There were 4 particular proposals there, some 594 trees in the winter planting season, the Belgrade Reserve, 240 trees there, and annual tree planting of approximately 1,000 trees. At the time, Ms Zamprimo advised that winter planting season was underway. I assume it no longer is. Could we have an update on progress?
Thank you for the question. Ms Zamprimo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So the planting funded through the Urban Greening Grants programme was completed during the 2024 planting season. The planting for Hurlingham Living Stream project, which I think is what you're alluding to, which received funding from a funding contribution from DBCA, will be completed in 2 stages during winter 2025 and 2026 in accordance with the original project proposal. And the Bill Graydon Reserve, which I believe is the other one that you're referring to, that project was completed, as was the remainder of the winter 2024 planting programme.
And the street trees?
That's part of the winter 2024 planting programme.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Amprimo, and thank you, Mr Bassett, for the questions. Okay, I'm just going to check with governance to see if there's any late questions in the tray. No, there's not? Okay. In that case, I'll now close public question time at 6:41 p.m. That brings us to item 7, which is the confirmation of minutes and notes. Item 7.1 is the minutes. Item 7.1.1 is the ordinary council meeting held on 19 November 2024. I'm about to seek a mover and a seconder that the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on 19 November 2024 be taken as read and confirmed as a true and correct record. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Coveney, thank you. Someone to second? Councillor Prendeville, thank you. Councillors, does anyone oppose this item? Councillor Choi, do you oppose this item?
No, I don't. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
All right. In that case, I'll simply declare it carried unanimously. We move on to item 7.2, which is notes of briefing. So I'm about to call for a mover and a seconder that council notes the following council briefings and workshops were held. 7.2.1, concept briefings and workshops. 7.2.2, council agenda briefing dated 3 December 2024. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Coveney, thank you. Someone to second? Councillor Navard, thank you. Councillors, does anyone oppose this? Councillor Choi, do you oppose this?
No, thanks, Mr Mayor.
All right. In that case, I'll simply declare it carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We move on to item 8, which is presentations. Item 8.1 is petitions, which is nil for this evening. Item 8.2 is gifts or awards presented to council. That's also nil for this evening. And item 8.3 is deputations. And deputations were heard at the council agenda briefing held on 3 December 2024. That brings us to item 9, which is method of dealing with agenda business. I wish to advise that the following agenda items are new reports and were not presented to the council agenda briefing held on 3 December 2024. Those items are as follows. Item 10.4.1, listing of payments, November 2024, and item 10.4.2, monthly financial statements, November 2024. I'll now seek confirmation from the Chief Executive Officer, Mr Mike Bradford, that all the report items contained in tonight's agenda were discussed at the November Council agenda briefing, with the obvious exception of those 2 items that I just mentioned. Mr Bradford.
Yes, Mr Mayor, with the exception of the 2 items you noted, that is correct.
Thank you very much, Mr Bradford. So, with the exception of those items to be withdrawn for discussion, reports will be adopted by exception resolution. And by this, I mean the officer recommendation will be adopted as is without discussion or amendment. The following items have been withdrawn. Item 10.1.1, Major Community Recreation Infrastructure Projects, Challenger Reserve Master Plan and George Burnett Master Plan. The reason for that is Councillor Glenn Cridland has an amendment. Item 10.1.3, Response to Notice of Motion, Public Art at the South Perth Foreshore. The reason for that is an absolute majority is required for recommendation 2, that I've declared a financial and proximity interest, and because Councillor Nick Coveney has an amendment. Item 10.3.1, Local Heritage Survey Review. The reason for that is I've declared a financial and proximity interest. Item 10.3.2, Major Land Transaction, Collier Park Golf Course Submissions. The reason for that is an absolute majority is required. Item 10.4.1, Listing of Payments, November 2024. The reason for that is it's a new report. Item 10.4.2, monthly financial statements, November 2024. The reason for that is it's a new report. And item 10.4.3, City of South Perth Annual Report 2023/24. And the reason is an absolute majority is required. Councillors, does anyone else wish to withdraw any? Councillor Navard? 10.3.7, which is revocation of local planning policy P350.09, significant views. Okay, we're pulling that one out. Bear with me, I'm just going to update my run sheet. Councillor D'Souza, did I see your hand go up?
I was going to say the same thing, Mr Mayor, 10.3.7.
All right, thank you. Councillors, any others? Councillor Cridland.
I'd like to remove the one that we're all here for tonight, which is the proposed City of South Perth Dogs Local Law 2025, 10.4.4.
10.4.4. This is proposed City of South Perth Dogs Local Law 2025. Okay. Any others, councillors? Councillor Choi?
No, that's fine. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
All right. In that case, I will now call for a mover and a seconder to carry the following items by exception resolution. Those are 10.1.2, RFT 11 of 2024, provision of minor building works. 10.3.3, South Perth Activity Centre Plan, Community Benefit Contribution Framework Annual Review. Item 10.3.4, proposed 6 multiple dwellings, lot 1 and 2, numbers 32A and 32B, Thelma Street, Como. Item 10.3.5, proposed change of use, single house to unhosted short-term rental accommodation, lot 45, number 197, Douglas Avenue, Kensington. Item 10.3.6, response to notice of motion, draft payment in lieu of parking plan. Item 10.5.1, 2023/24 annual financial statements, external audit information systems report. Item 10.5.2, 2023/24 City of South Perth annual financial report. Item 10.5.3, quarterly activity report. Item 10.5.4, Audit Register Progress Report, first quarter update. And item 10.5.5, Policy Review Infrastructure Services. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Coveney, seconded by Councillor Brenda Abrandis. Councillors, does anyone oppose any of these items? Councillor Choi?
No, thanks, Mr Mayor.
All right. In that case, those items have just been passed by exception resolution in accordance with clause 5.5 of the City of South Perth Standing Orders Local Law 2007, and the officer's recommendations have been accepted by council. We'll now be moving on to those reports identified to be withdrawn for discussion. So that brings us to item 10. The first item to be withdrawn for discussion this evening is item 10.1.1. entitled Major Community Recreation Infrastructure Projects, Challenger Reserve Master Plan and George Burnett Master Plan. So, let's see. No, that's not relevant to this one. I do see that Councillor Cridland has put through an amended motion at 4:52 p.m. this evening. Councillor Cridland, did you want to lead with your amended motion?
Subject to that being okay with yourself and there being a seconder, yes, Mr Mayor.
All right. In that case, I might ask you to read your amended motion, at least to the extent that that your amended motion is different from the officer recommendation.
I'll do my best to explain the differences to what's in the agenda as we go through. Mr.
Thanks. Just the motion for the moment, and then I'll have to see about a seconder, and then I'll invite you to provide your reasons.
Certainly. The amended motion, sorry, you just want me to read out the amended motion?
That's right, but perhaps it could be along the lines of, paragraph 1, after the words George Burnett Park, insert the words. We've all got it on the screen here, so we'll be able to follow it, but that's the process we've got to follow.
It's not on that one over there. Okay.
Okay, and it should be on your screen as well.
All right. My amendment will insert the words after George Burnett Park in paragraph 1, after the state government has determined its preferred location for the new inner, it should say southern suburbs, indoor sports courts as part of its 8 November 2024 announced planning project. That's the amendment to paragraph 1. In respect of paragraph 2, I would, my motion amends Roman numeral 2 by removing the words where there is currently or in the near future under capacity, and removes from Roman subparagraph 3 where there is higher future demand, and in respect of subparagraph Roman 4, adds the words reasonably identifiable complementary before the term potential users, and after that term adds the words and to be designed with existing user groups that agree in principle to be part of any co-located facility and to meet the existing and future foreseeable requirements. For example, storage space, permanent display and function areas, bar and kitchen of the existing users, and the reasonably identifiable complementary potential users. Those are the amendments to the motion that's been published.
Thank you, Councillor Cridland. Is there someone who would like to second Councillor Cridland's amended motion? Councillor Prendeville. Councillor Cridland, the floor is yours for your reasons.
At the outset, I apologise for the lateness of sending through the amendment, and I further apologise for the lack of published reasons for the change. So that's my initial apology. In respect of the changes that I have proposed, in respect of paragraph 1, the change will put a hold on the city spending money and doing works on George Burnett investigations. And the reason for that is the state government, surprisingly, late in the electoral cycle, determined that it would be appropriate to have a project planning for inner southern suburbs sports courts, and announced that on the 8th of November 2024, along with $2 million to plan for that. Now, of course, people might have heard of me banging like a dunny door in the wind for the last 10 years about how we haven't had sufficient indoor sports courts, and I would have thought that was obvious to anyone who has children who play sport. But nonetheless, the state government has now determined that it's appropriate to start planning for that. And one of the locations they are looking at with $2 million for planning, which seems like a lot of money, is George Burnett, along with Kensington, either of which would be entirely appropriate locations. But if the state government is going to pay for this, it doesn't make sense for us to do it. And what happens if they decide they're going to do it at George Burnett? Well, we've got that paid for. If they do it at Kensington, we've wasted money as well. So it seems to me that we should wait until they decide. They can't surely hold on much longer in determining where it's going to be, given that Blind Freddy for the last 10 years has seen that we need to have them yesterday. So that's the reason for number 1. It's to avoid wastage. And I do note that the project that we received $20 million from the federal government would have seen indoor sports courts already built in South Perth by now, but those weren't proceeded with, and that would have been kind of halfway in between George Burnett and Kensington. In respect of the amendments to the second paragraph, This is a very different project which has been put together in the same motion. It relates to the city's plans for a multi-sports facility down at Challenger Reserve, as set out in the report. As the report says on page 15, specifically the project would involve developing a business plan for a new multi-purpose pavilion, seeking funding for the new multi-purpose pavilion and building it. So I think it's important that we, as best we can, set out some ground rules so that we don't end up with the absolute catastrophe or disaster that has happened in some of the other multi-purpose pavilions, and one only needs to mention East Fremantle as perhaps the worst facility built for sporting groups in WA, certainly in my lifetime. I have put in these changes so that we hopefully reduce the chance of that. And certainly I would say multi-purpose pavilions and sports facilities is a great simple solution to a difficult and complex question, and often, well, almost always, the simple solution to a very complex question is wrong. So we need to be very careful that we bring along with us people if we're going to build a multi-purpose pavilion, and we have their agreement at the outset, both that they're going to go there, and certainly when I was speaking to the Bridge Club last week, that wasn't their position. But if they are to agree and go along, so their current location can be sold as is set out.
Councillor Cridland, I'm sorry to interrupt. That's 5 minutes. I'll move a motion that you be granted a further 5 minutes to speak. Could I have a seconder for that motion, please? Councillors, please cast your votes on a motion that Councillor Cridland be granted a further 5 minutes to speak. And Councillor Choi, how would you like to vote on that?
Yes, thank you.
All right, just waiting for the votes to come in. Oh, it's over there, is it? Or was it? Oh, brilliant. Okay, thanks. New systems, folks. All right, that was unanimous. Sorry for the interruption, Councillor Cridland. Please continue.
Mr Mayor, sorry. Often I think anyone would say no to Councillor Cridland having more time, but
I forget to ask for a seconder.
I didn't see anything on our screen, so there was no vote that took place.
Sorry, it's the cold. Could you repeat that?
Sorry, there was no vote that just took place. Our screens were blank.
Oh, okay. Governance. Well, let's do it by hand for the time being. Folks, all those in favour, please raise your hands. And Councillor Choi has already said in favour. Okay, that was unanimous. Yeah, I didn't see anything go up there, but well, glad we got it sorted out. Please continue, Councillor Cridland.
Thank you very much, and I'm glad that I hadn't sent Councillor Choi to sleep. I was a bit worried there with her delay in responding. Yes, so in respect of the Bridge Club, as set out on page 16, what is indicated there is that once they move to a place that at least some of the members told me last week they didn't want to go to, their facility will be sold. So we need to incredibly carefully plan for this if this is to happen, which is why I've suggested these changes. We need to take people along with us, and we need to see whether it's actually possible, which is why I've suggested we have some more detail in there, and so that all the options are put to the council when it's to come out, because I do know that there are differences between staff and council in respect of what is and what is not properly provided for in the city. I've certainly heard that we have, at least from staff, that we have too many bowls facilities and too many tennis courts, amongst other public facilities, and I'm sure that that is not a view that is shared by my colleagues around the council table. So I think it's important that we take out words that allow some subjective massaging of options before they come to the council, such as under capacity or where there might be higher future demand, because certainly what I've heard, there are subjective views which are different to mine in respect of that. I do apologise for the monologue. This is something that I have been very passionate about on my time on council, and certainly multifunction sporting facilities and the recreational facilities plan is something that I have spoken on several times during my tenure on council, and it is why the council previously rejected a policy which required there only be multifunction facilities. We need to be very careful that if we're going to do it, we don't recreate East Fremantle, and we take the people and the clubs along with us and make them at least as successful as they currently are now. So I commend the motion and hope that I haven't been difficult to understand.
Thank you, Councillor Cridland. Councillor Prendeville, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am in support of this motion this evening. I think, like Councillor Cridland, I have some concerns about this original idea. I think, firstly, the state government having promised $2 million of funds dedicated to the planning for indoor sports courts is fantastic, but I think, as alongside Councillor Cridland, it's prudent to wait for a decision on location before sort of spending time and resources that may be wasted at the end. I think in terms of point 2, I had voiced concerns regarding co-located facilities. Some of these amendments alleviate some of these concerns. I think looking into complementary sports and groups is essential so that we help our sporting groups retain their identity, their financial independence, their sort of view for their future, and not sort of have them end up in a big dorm situation with other users at the same time. I think it doesn't necessarily mean that they're the biggest club, but if they're there now, we want to support them, what they have, and into the future as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Prendeville. Councillors, does anyone wish to speak against the amended motion? Councillor Brenda Brandis, or question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a few questions with regard to these amendments.
Fire away.
Thank you. So firstly, with regard to the state government obviously indicating that they had intention to fund indoor sports courts, has the city been made aware, or has it come to the city's attention that we are likely to receive funding from the state government?
Who should I send that to? Mr. Bradford?
So the press release from the state government was around a fund, $2 million to explore, and I haven't got the words in front of me, but locations in the inner south area. So that's, I presume that's $2 million for the Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries to conduct a study. And so we wouldn't expect to receive any funding through that arrangement, but we do expect to be consulted as part of that project, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Bradford. Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Sierra Bradford. With regard to the amendments to paragraph 1, do we foresee this as being a bit of a delay with regard to a very important process that we need to undertake? My concern is often waiting for state government to commit or to indicate their intentions could take a very long time. We might be waiting a significant amount of time. Does the administration feel that this would actually delay our process, and if so, by how much?
Mr. Bradford or Ms. Amprimo? Ms. Amprimo.
Yeah, we don't know what that time frame might be, so we can't really say one way or another whether it will delay the process or not. As is noted in the report, in the budget is approved the contaminated sites process, so that will proceed as it's already approved in the budget and would help inform any decision on the future sports courts there.
Thank you, Ms Amprimo. Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Thank you, Director Amprimo. Thank you, Mr Mayor. So we already have budget allocated with regard to undertaking this investigation, this activity. Is there any risk that undertaking the initial review work now, that we might be incurring additional costs if we were to receive funding? Are we at any risk of incurring any more additional costs with regard to the process that we might commence now?
Mr Bradford or Ms Amprimo? Or Ms Shaw?
I'll have a go. I'm not sure I understand completely what you're asking, but as Director Amprimo said, we have budget already allocated for conducting the contaminated sites investigation, really starting that process, and that's a necessary process regardless of any other activity that we should undertake. In terms of the other work we might undertake, we didn't have any. There is no allocation in the budget for any further work this year related to this, but we would have conducted using internal resources any preliminary planning, and so I don't think that this has an impact in terms of funding or extra expense. The one thing I would flag is that whilst I'd hope the state government would quickly make a decision on a court's location that would then allow council to make further decisions, there is some risk that the state government doesn't make a decision quickly. But given that the first step in our process is to look at contaminated sites, I don't think that's a big risk. I think we'll be able to make progress on that, and hopefully the state government does progress their project.
Thank you, Mr Bradford. Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, CEO Bradford. With regard to the amendment to paragraph 2, Roman numeral 4, subsection A, it reads, with potential users and to be designed with existing user groups that agree in principle or in part to any of the co-located facility. The question I've got with regard to that amendment is, isn't that what the administration is actually already doing in discussing any potential relocations or movements with existing users? So this first paragraph, subparagraph A, doesn't necessarily preclude the good work the administration are doing in consulting with the user groups?
Ms Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, that's correct. So we would be undertaking the steps that have been outlined in the amendment in any instance. So it was our intention to liaise with the different user groups and ensure that they agree in principle to being co-located in a facility. So the administration has no issue with these amendments that have been put forward.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Councillor D'Souza.
I've got some questions, Mr Mayor.
Fire away.
Look, I've got no issue with paragraph 2. I think Councillor Cridlin has put forward clear principles going forward on this process. I'm more concerned about paragraph 1, and I get what Councillor Cridlin's trying to do, but my question is, by sort of the CEO mentioned that this is already budgeted for, it's already within operational spending, so it wouldn't cost anything more. By progressing with, I guess, pre-planning for GBLC, would that not, in a way, strengthen any potential case we can put forward to the state in the $2 million process they're undertaking?
Ms Shaw.
No, thank you, Mr Mayor. So the City's planned investigation and the State Government's indoor courts investigation were compatible projects. So we were originally of the view that we could benefit with them being undertaken in unison, because we would effectively just discuss and share any relevant information as it arises through the process. However, the wording that's put here doesn't prevent the city from sharing any information it has about existing or potential users or any conditions of the site that we already know. So we can still provide that information to the state government to feed into their investigation. And as was mentioned earlier, we can still progress the contaminated sites investigation anyway.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Councillor D'Souza?
Thank you, Ms Shaw. But in terms of, apart from the contaminated sites work and work that's already been done, for future planning work, the effect of paragraph 1 would put all of that on hold. Is that correct?
Ms Shaw?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, we wouldn't progress to any sort of detailed design work and the like until such time we knew the outcome based on the amendment that's been put forward.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Councillor D'Souza?
And would such work, if presented to the state in the parallel process mentioned by Ms Shaw, potentially help the city in obtaining further funding through this process?
Mr Bradford?
Yeah, when we drafted this report, we were aware broadly of the state was considering looking at indoor sports courts. And so we saw what's proposed at 1 as the report, the officer's report, was complementary to any work the state would undertake and might position us to take advantage of the work the state government might do, in the view that, you know, if the city had contemplated a concept of 4 courts, for example, and the state said, could we add more courts to it? That would be very much complementary. And so that was the intention behind it. We had no intention of going full steam ahead, regardless of the state government decision. Notwithstanding that, I don't think that the amendment poses any significant challenges, given, as I explained, the first step is that contaminated sites, and that will take some work to get through. But I did flag that in the event, and hopefully the state government does progress this project quickly, but in the event they don't, for either, if we're in a year's time or 2 years' time, there is no decision, then I would expect to have to come back to council and propose a different decision to the one that's being proposed.
Thank you, Mr Bradford. Councillors, does anyone wish... Oh, Councillor Brenda Abrandis, a question or speaking?
Question, thank you, Mr Mayor. With reference to the amendment for paragraph 2, Roman numeral 4 and subparagraph B, it talks about to meet the existing and future foreseeable requirements, for example, storage space, permanent display and function areas, bar and kitchen of the existing unit users and the reasonably identifiable complementary potential users. Can the administration please advise, is there anything that you would not be doing that's already included in that subparagraph when you're consulting with potential users or co-located clubs or associations?
Ms Shaw, should I send that in your direction?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, we would be doing all of those things, which is why we have no objection to them being stated in the amendment.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Councillors, is there anyone who wishes to speak against the amended motion? Councillor Choi?
Yes, thanks, Mr Mayor. I just want to know if there's, I'm hearing, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that the officers don't have any issues with the amendments, particularly the second and third part of the amendments, but potentially the first paragraph, the amendments with regards to waiting for the state government to announce its time frame or commitment to George Burnett. Is that correct? Have I got that right? Or can someone please just clarify that for me?
Mr Bradford?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I think broadly we're comfortable with all of the amendments. I do flag, though, that the way this is worded, and I would hope also, is that the state government progresses their project quickly. But in the event they don't, then council may need to reconsider the position, because I would expect that if the state government doesn't announce a location, then given that the city has identified George Burnett as a site for indoor sports courts, that at some point council would want to progress that. But that's a future decision that can be made.
Thank you, Mr Bradford. Councillor D'Souza?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. So subject to what Councillor Cridland thinks, can I propose when we get to the vote, to put paragraph 1 and paragraph 2 as two separate votes?
I'll just check with governance about that. I'm a bit worried about what might happen if one was passed and one wasn't. But I'll be the first to admit that I'm not operating at 100% capacity tonight. So, Mr Adams or Ms Fryer? All right, I'm going to allow it, folks, but don't make me regret it. Yeah. Yeah, actually, all right. 2 secs, I'm going to do a sidebar. All right, so I've just conferred with Mr Bradford. At this stage, I'm going to foreshadow the officer recommendation because I would hate for us to get to a situation where one or more parts were not passed and we have a void in our decision making. You know what? I'm sorry, folks. I will backtrack on what I said before. I think I am going to have it go as a holus bolus because just thinking it through, there is a possibility for disaster if we were to try and attack this one piecemeal. So, yes, I retract what I said before. We will vote on this one as a job lot, as they say. You're keeping me on my toes tonight, folks. I guess it's before Christmas and we like a bit of Christmas entertainment. Is there anyone who wishes to speak either for or against the amended motion? Councillor Navard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I'd like to speak for it because I think the important thing is for us as a council not to get distracted by promises of, other incentives. I think we've got to be clear that we stick to what we do, and if for whatever reason we get these extra bonuses, then it seems to me that we could consider at that point. But that's why I like this. It's nice and clear and people can see that this is the way we're doing it.
Thank you, Councillor Navard. Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I will speak in favour of the amendments. Understanding tonight that the administration are actually quite comfortable that everything they're already doing is included in these amendments. The potential delay from state government advising of any potential support or additional funding would only be a bonus, so it's not going to impede the additional work that could be done up front at this point in time. I do support this item. I think it doesn't incur any additional burden on the administration. It would have been nicer to have a bit more time on the item and also the reasons for the change a bit earlier to give due consideration as opposed to at the meeting. But thank you, I will be supporting this item.
Thank you, Councillor Brenda Brandis. Councillors, is there anyone else who wishes to speak either for or against this amended motion? Councillor Choi?
Yes, thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, I will also support this amended motion put forward by Councillor Cridland because from what I'm hearing, there is no implications as expressed by the administration in regards to their plans and, especially, looking at that potentially contaminated site. First off the list, I think, as long as the city are comfortable with that and we can progress that part of it at least, hopefully we'll find out soon as to the state government's commitment or not. So, yes, I'm happy to support this too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Choi. And I guess you've foreshadowed a question that I was going to ask, and I'm not sure if it's to Ms Shaw or Mr Bradford or Ms Amprimo, but I would have thought that the work to do with the contaminated sites should probably go ahead irrespective of what the state government does or announces or doesn't announce. Mr Bradford or Ms Amprimo, is it your interpretation that that could be done notwithstanding the changes being proposed by Councillor Cridland?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So my interpretation of the changes are that it is only the investigation into the development of sports courts that is to be held until the state government makes a decision. Just to be clear, the city has an obligation to progress with the contaminated sites investigation independently of this process, and would do that whether we were considering sports courts there or not.
All right, so just to humour me, because, are we saying that irrespective of whether council votes for Councillor Cridland's amended motion or the officer recommendation, the investigation into the contaminated sites issues will go ahead unimpeded and without delay?
That is correct, Mr Mayor. My interpretation of that amendment is that it does not prevent us from proceeding with the contaminated sites.
All right, thank you. In that case, I'll speak and I'll say a few words. Without wanting to labour the point, this is an important item and we've only had an hour before this meeting to consider Councillor Cridland's amended motion. You all know that I don't like amended motions like this because they do put elected members and the city administration under intense pressure to get across something in a very short period of time, a period of time that is usually pretty busy to begin with. I get awfully tempted to vote against late amendments on principle because I think generally, not talking about this one in particular, but generally they represent an avoidable risk to good governance. But I am going to support this one because I'm satisfied by what the officers have had to say that there aren't any real risks to this amended motion. But I will foreshadow the officer recommendation just in case this doesn't get up and we otherwise end up with a void on this item and no decision. So I'm supporting it, but I'm going to foreshadow the officer recommendation just in case. Would anyone else like to speak either for or against? No. Councillor Choi? I know you did speak, Councillor Choi. Councillor Cridland, if you'd like to rebut any arguments made during debate. I don't think anyone actually spoke against it, but you have 5 minutes to rebut any arguments if you would like to do so.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. It's more, I don't wish to rebut any arguments made against it, but more two things. One, I certainly acknowledge that I am duly chastised by yourself and Councillor Brenda Abrandis, and quite properly so, because this was a late amendment and it is not good governance to bring late amendments. So I acknowledge my offending at the outset and ask for a spent conviction maybe. But anyway, in respect of the questions, I did my best to carefully craft the amendment so it would not affect the investigations into contaminated sites that George Burnett facility may be located on, and that was because those investigations need to go on irrespective of whether or not we build indoor multi-sports courts there or not. So that's the way I designed the amendment, so that should not stop that. That's proper work that should proceed. But in my view, the amendment says, well, let's just hold on and work out where the state government is going to put their sports courts, because if they're going to put them at George Burnett, great, let's work together with them. If they're going to put them at Kensington, then perhaps we should not be building a competitor or an exact competitor with them at George Burnett. And if the state government can't make a quick decision with $2 million to deal with what is a really obvious, long-standing, overdue need, then they're not very good at doing their stuff, because it's not a difficult question, it's not a difficult problem, and they really need to get on with it. And if they haven't done it in a reasonable time, I would not be surprised or disappointed if the city brought this back for us to just go ahead regardless of them. In respect of the second paragraph, very, very different item, relates more to multi-function facilities, and the city's responded in respect of questions saying that they've got no issues with my amendments because they are all good practice and it's what they would do. And I'm relieved by that. I think that's all to be commended, but I think it's very good for it to be put down expressly, because clearly none of it happened at East Fremantle, and a disaster resulted. So I think it's good to put on the table, these are the council's expectations, and the city has said, well, gosh, it's what we... So I don't think it's problematic, and I hope you'll support the amended motion.
Thank you, Councillor Credland. So, councillors, I'm putting Councillor Credland's amended motion on item 10.1.1 to the vote as a holus bolus motion. Please cast your votes. And Councillor Choi, how do you vote?
For, thanks, Mr Mayor.
All right. That was unanimous. Thank you, councillors. We're about to move on to item 10.1.3, but as you know, I've declared a financial and proximity interest in that item and also in the following item, 10.3.1, and I will be leaving the chamber due to the financial and proximity interest that I've declared. Ordinarily, I would turn over the role of presiding member to the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Waugh, at this time, but Councillor Waugh is an apology for this evening. So in these circumstances, Council has to choose one of the remaining elected members in the room to take over as, I guess, backup presiding member. So I have received an email from Councillor Credland saying that he's willing to do that. I'm happy to move a motion in accordance with section 5.6 subsection 3 of the Local Government Act 1995 to appoint Councillor Glenn Credland to preside over the following items. That's 10.1.3, response to notice of motion, public art at the South Perth foreshore, and 10.3.1, local heritage review. Would someone second that motion? Councillor Coveney, thank you. We can probably do this by show of hands. Councillors, all those in favour, please raise your hands. Councillor Choi, how do you vote on that one?
For.
All right, so that was unanimous. Thank you all. Councillor Credland, I'll invite you to take my place as presiding member for the next two items, and if someone could come and get me afterwards, that would be appreciated. I'll see you all soon.
It's been a while since I've been up here. Okay, it brings us along to 10.1.3, which is, the item is a response to a notice of motion, public art in the South Perth foreshore. We have an officer recommendation, and we also have put forward by Councillor Coveney an amendment to that substantive motion. Now, Councillor Coveney, do you wish to move the motion with your amendment?
Yes, please, Councillor Credland.
All right. Now, is that up on the screen for everyone to see?
Yes, it is.
All right. Do you want to read out to the gallery and the fellow councillors your amendment to that substantive motion put forward by the city?
Thank you, Councillor Credland. I've added a paragraph 3 which reads as follows. Note that available funds within the Public Art Reserve will be used to implement various public art projects within activity centres throughout the city in accordance with the Public Art Master Plan.
All right. Do we have someone to second that motion as amended? Thank you very much, Councillor Navard. Councillor Coveney, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Councillor Credland. The Public Art Reserve, which can only be spent on art, has about $400,000 sitting in it. And in my view, the city ought to use those funds to improve activation, placemaking and amenity, as opposed to having them sitting there collecting dust and providing no benefit to residents. The Create initiative of the Public Art Master Plan is to activate and beautify spaces throughout public art. And relevant to this amended motion, the Angelo Street Activity Centre, the Preston Street Activity Centre, the Moresby Road Activity Centre and the Welbourne Avenue Activity Centre are all rated as high priorities in the Public Art Master Plan, so each of our wards. There are many ways in which we can activate our activity centres, and for those that want to spend a bit of time reading, I have included an extra about that. But the most obvious examples relevant to this amendment with public art is things like painting murals, traffic control boxes, bins, planter boxes, and potentially creative seating. I emailed an extra about activation of precincts on the 1st of August 24 and about public art specifically on the 20th of October 24. I did the latter after consulting with the Arts Committee, of which I'm a part of, and their view was that an art piece so prominent as to attract tourists to South Perth would require external funding on top of all the funds held in the Public Art Reserve. And whilst that approach was supported by the Public Arts Committee and the city could consider it, in my opinion, the funds would be better spent across the activity centres of the whole district. The ideas that are discussed in my annexure about activation are not new concepts. They've been successfully implemented by other local governments in other precincts like Subiaco, Mount Lawley, Mount Hawthorn, North Perth, Vic Park, Perth and Freo. And in my view, our activity centres ought to be competitive destinations for our residents and to our small businesses. And the city ought to do its bit to achieve that outcome with the levers that it has available to it. Thank you.
Councillor Navard.
Thank you, presiding member. Yes, the reason that I particularly like this is that it is not preoccupied with one area. I think that the whole of the city deserves whatever attention we can offer it, and therefore, from my perspective, and having been on the Art Committee in the past, I would fully endorse Councillor Coveney's addition to the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Navard. Now, do we have any speakers against the motion as amended? Yes, Councillor Brendel-Brandis.
Thank you, Mr Presiding Member. I have a couple of questions on this item.
So they're questions rather than speaking against?
Yes, that's correct.
And are you able to identify who the questions are to?
I would probably guess Director Shaw.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So just with regard to the requirement to utilise the funds in the Public Art Reserve, do we have a requirement for those funds currently to be incurred on art in the locality of where the funds were actually currently raised?
Yes, sorry, Director Shaw, I've forgotten how to do this, so you'll just have to give me a nudge.
Thank you. No, there isn't. There is an established position for public open space developer contributions to be spent in the location or in the vicinity of where the development occurred and the subdivision occurred. And other expenditure requires approval by the Minister for Planning. But for public art, there's actually no requirement in any sort of legislation in that respect. So the funds are just collected, and whilst it would be good practice to spend it obviously in the vicinity of where the development happened, I don't believe there's any expectation from those developers to otherwise have that occur. And in most cases, the developers have either provided the public art on site to fulfil the requirements of the local planning policy, or have paid their contribution and left. And they haven't ever followed up with us about expenditure.
Thank you, Director Shaw.
Thank you. You had a further question, Councillor Brendel-Brandis.
Yeah, thank you, Presiding Member. With regard to the funds that have been accumulating in the Public Arts Reserve, would it be fair to say that most of the funds have been derived from the Mill Point ward because of the substantial developments in that area, and also because the Mill Point ward does attract a lot of tourists because of its foreshore facing the city, that artworks along that open area would probably be the best area to benefit from utilising public art funds?
Director Shaw.
Thank you. I don't have the details in front of me of where all of the contributions were collected, but based on my time here, I would say that the majority of contributions would actually come from the Como ward, because cash in lieu has been provided for developers as part of the Canning Bridge Activity Centre Plan area. In terms of where the public artwork should be located, the Public Art Master Plan provides guidance on suitable locations. There are a number of locations within the Mill Point ward, but there are also equally locations in the Como ward where they could be spent. A lot of the criteria is around major thoroughfares and where they're most likely to be publicly accessible. So we would determine that having guidance to the Public Art Master Plan.
Further question?
Thank you, Presiding Member, and thank you, Director Shaw. With regard to the amendment, is there anything in that amendment that we would not be ordinarily doing with regard to, I suppose, the meetings from the Public Art Committee and recommendations that would be made through to Council to incur expenditure on public art projects within activity centres throughout the city? So we'd already be doing what the amendment actually has been clarified as.
Director Shaw.
Thank you. So in terms of the amendment with Part 3, that's correct. We would be implementing various public art projects. We're required to consider the location of public art in accordance with Council's adopted Public Art Master Plan. So we would be doing that. I think this probably just highlights that where the expenditure occurs would be in accordance with an adopted document.
Just about there. Oh, I'm sorry, so you've finished your questions? Or is there a point of order? I'm sorry.
I will allow Councillor Navarre to actually ask the next question.
That's very generous of you, can I say, Councillor Brenda Brandis. Councillor Navarre.
Oh, thank you. To Director Shaw, could you confirm, please, how much funding there is currently in the arts budget? I think you've told us before, but if you could just mention it again.
Director Shaw.
Sorry, bear with me, I'm just finding the page. Sorry, I don't have the figure in front of me. From memory, it was around 400,000, 427,000, thank you.
Thank you, Director Shaw. Okay, Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Member. My final question with regard to this amendment for Director Shaw. The attachments to the amendment include obviously areas within the city, and they've been identified as having blank walls or maybe relatively boring street furniture, in contrast to some of our neighbouring local governments, such as Vincent or Perth. Just with reference to the work that we undertake, obviously we've got a committee, we've obviously got councillors who are members to that committee to make recommendations for street art, and everything that's been put forward to council for approval with regard to any public arts has a formal process. So I suppose the question I have with regard to this is, in comparing the City of South Perth to our neighbours, is this reasonable given that the administration are undertaking what is required and has actually been worked through a public arts committee?
Director Shaw, the questions.
Thank you. Probably more of a comment. So where art is provided on site and visible from the public realm, the artworks that have been delivered to date have been put forward by the developers themselves, and they would typically engage an artist as part of that process. The artwork would then be presented to the Public Arts Advisory Group for comment and feedback, and the design would be refined before being delivered by the developer. In terms of the artwork that the city has actually developed, we haven't delivered any major piece of public art recently. We have delivered some forms of public art, for example, the box galleries in Manning. But we would follow the same process for any future large-scale public art proposal that the city was looking to install. So it would go through the Public Arts Advisory Group as well.
And you're looking satisfied? All your questions? All right. I think that takes us to the part of debate where people would normally, if they're going to, would speak against the motion as amended and put. So do we have anyone to speak against it? And again, showing my noviceness, Councillor Choi, I haven't, you're still there?
Thank you, Mr. Cridland, Councillor Cridland. I am still here, and thanks for not forgetting about me. I just wanted to ask a question, if I may.
Yes. Your question?
Just if there's any implications or any commentary that the city would like to make on this amendment to this motion and officer recommendation, please.
Sorry, who was the question addressed to?
I think it's again to Director Shaw.
Right, Director Shaw.
Thank you, Councillor Cridland. So as I understand it, the question is, do we have any comments on the recommendation that's provided? We have no objections to this, and I'm sure the team looks forward to an additional allocation of $15,000 to deliver seasonal and temporary activations. And point three, we would be delivering our work in accordance with the Public Art Master Plan in any instance, as I'd previously stated.
Thank you, Director Shaw. Now, moving back to debate, do we have anyone to speak against this motion? Councillor Brenda O'Brandis.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Member. I am speaking against the amendment to this item, primarily because the amendment actually doesn't do anything that the administration isn't already doing. The administration hold the public art advisory committees, which includes from time to time members of council. The decision-making process is in consultation with experts and identifies particular artworks that should be recommended for approval to council or through developers' contributions. So the amendment here doesn't actually do anything that isn't already being done. I understand we do have money available, and all we really need are recommendations to come forward to identify locations and pieces of artwork that should be installed in the city. I also feel that everything that the city has needed to do and the administration have undertaken with regard to artworks is through a formal process. It's been requested or recommendations have been put forward. So we don't need an amendment, I suppose, to tell us exactly what we're already doing, what the administration would already undertake. So I see this amendment as being nothing additional, nothing new, not adding value to what the officers have included in their substantive motion. So for that reason, I won't be supporting this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brenda O'Brandis. It takes us back to the other side of the debate. Is there someone to speak for the motion as amended and moved?
Councillor Cridland?
Yes. So, sorry, Councillor Choi, did you wish to speak?
Yes. Yes, thank you, Councillor Cridland. Can I just ask a question? Just want to clarify. The $15,000 in paragraph 2 of the officer recommendation, was that ordinarily going to come out of the public art reserve, or would that have come out of municipal funds? I'm just thinking about that. And then if it was already going to come out of the art reserve, then yeah, why would the amended the addition of paragraph 3 be necessary? So I just wanted to clarify that, please.
Director Shaw.
Thank you, Councillor Cridland. So there's currently $15,000 available in the city's 2024-25 budget. In the financial implications section of the report, we had originally recommended there that we would consider an additional $15,000 allocation as part of the mid-year budget review process. But the amendment that's been put forward for part 2 just simply looks to approve that as part of the budget. So council would be making a decision tonight potentially to just include that as part of the budget now, subject to an absolute majority.
CEO.
And it would come from municipal funds.
Hopefully that answers your question, Councillor Choi.
So, sorry, Councillor Cridland, and thank you to Director Shaw and CEO Bradford. So, paragraph 3 basically then asserts that that money would then come out of the public art reserve and not from municipal funds. Is that correct?
You can't see the CEO shaking his head, Councillor Choi, but I think he's indicating no.
That's correct, Mr. Presiding Member.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Is there someone to speak for the motion? Anyone else to speak against? Councillor Coveney, would you like to sum up, wind up, rebut?
Thank you, Councillor Cridland. Look, this amendment is consistent with our strategic documents, particularly the Public Art Master Plan. There's no time limit on it. Art is done externally, so there's no operational impact. And the wording of this motion, the reason it's a note is because I've adopted the preferred wording of the administration. The original wording included things like bringing a report, and I opted against that to release administrative burden. But ultimately what it still does do is flag an intention of council to the administration, but also to the public who can see what we're doing and what we have planned. It is consistent with the CEO's KPIs that we all unanimously endorsed in the mid-year about activation. This is really about improving the amenity for our residents and increasing the foot traffic for our businesses. So I encourage you all to please support this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Coveney. Now we need to put this to the vote. I don't know what button to push though. Do I do something? Oh, okay. And Councillor Choi, would you like to indicate to the meeting which way you're voting, yes or no?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Councillor Cridland. That's for.
Right, thank you. Given that, the motion as amended is passed 6 votes to 1. And for the purposes of people who are watching, listening, I can't tell you who the one who voted against is. There we go, it's on screen. Councillor Brenda O'Brandis was the person who voted, or councillor rather, who voted against it. Councillors Choi, Coveney, Cridland, D'Souza, Navard and Prendeville voted for, which takes us to the next item, which unfortunately, at least for me, is quite a complex one. complex procedurally at least, and that is 10.3.1, which is the local heritage review. And councillors may recall that debate on this item was adjourned on the 28th of May 2024 Ordinary Council meeting. And again, for those who don't remember, Councillor Navard moved the item and Councillor D'Souza seconded it. And then Councillor Navard spoke to the motion, and then Councillor D'Souza didn't speak. The next, the presiding member called for someone to speak against the item, but it was at that stage that debate was adjourned. So, in accordance with the standing orders, Standing Order 15.2 paragraph B, debate has to be resumed at this meeting where it was interrupted. So the appropriate part of the debate is there someone to speak against this item?
I have a question, if that's okay.
It depends what your question is, really, doesn't it?
My question is directed to Director Shaw. I just want to confirm that we are in fact required to advertise something.
Through you, Councillor Cridland, the Heritage Act requires council to prepare and adopt a local heritage survey. It's silent on the advertising requirements. However, the Heritage Council has produced some guidelines that provide guidance on advertising. So the city intends to undertake extensive public consultation on this document, and as mentioned in public question time, will now also include a public forum or workshop where members of the public and landowners can come and ask questions about the process and about what the different categories of significance mean.
All right. Another question, Councillor
Can I
Coveney?
speak in favour?
No, you can't. Not yet, because we're up to, was there someone to speak against it first? And I'm not seeing anyone, so again, Councillor Choi.
Thank you, Councillor Cridland. No, I would not like to speak against. Thank you.
All right, you may now speak for the motion, Councillor Coveney.
Thank you, Councillor Cridland. Look, I'm supporting this motion only because we do need to put something out to public consultation, but I do foreshadow at this stage that I will be bringing an amendment to take off the list any home where the owner objects. I agree with preserving heritage when we're talking about assets which are used by the community, the old police station, the post office, the Como Theatre. But I have a fundamental difficulty supporting heritage when we're talking about homes, and that's because of the impact on private property rights. A person's home is more often than not their main asset. It's one they've sunk their life savings into. It's one in which they invest their time, their money, and their energy into maintaining. As we heard last week, there's a risk and there is a bit of confusion now about if these homes are put on the register, we're slashing their values and making it more costly and difficult for owners to maintain them. So I just ask each councillor to consider if that is the case. Would you support putting your own home on the list? Potentially instantly losing value, potentially instantly making it harder to maintain and making it harder to sell. If the answer is no, you don't want your home on this list, then I'd ask you to reflect on whether you're comfortable looking your neighbour in the eye and and telling them you're going to put their home on it. Don't get me wrong, I do love character homes, and in fact, I think the people that buy them do too. It's because they cost more to buy and they simply cost more to maintain. So I just have such a difficulty about making their lives harder. But that's ultimately an argument for a different night. And tonight we are simply voting on putting it out to consultation, and we have to do it. So let's do it.
Thank you, Councillor Coveney. Now, noting that no one else, well, earlier at least, wanted to speak against it, is there anyone else, Councillor Choi included, who wishes to speak on this particular item? Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Member. I am speaking in favour of this item as we do need to undertake the advertising for the draft local heritage survey. I am disappointed that we didn't achieve an independent review. I'm slightly enthusiastic with regard to increase in community consultation and public forums or focus groups to actually consider heritage properties. I think it's a very important process that needs to be undertaken because we should be considering the broader community with regard to heritage and protection of properties. I think it would be a little bit naive if we were to just flippantly consider this and not consider extending the properties for consideration for protection. And for that reason, I would be very keen with regard to understanding any additional properties that may be listed through this advertising process. I do support this motion, given that we need to advertise, but there is still quite a bit more that we need to undertake with regard to consultation with the community and I suppose clearer engagement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brenda Abrandis. Anyone else to speak? Yes, Councillor Prendeville.
Thank you, Councillor Cridland. I'll be brief. It's a difficult topic and I understand the arguments for or against. I will be supporting it because it's important to push forward and I think it'll be very interesting to hear from the community on these things. Like Councillor Coveney, I have concerns about someone's home ending up on the register and them incurring extra costs for maintenance or running into a position where they can't do certain things on their own home. So without knowing that their home, without nominating their home themselves and without wanting it on the list, these sorts of issues sort of are concerning to me. There are lots of amazing, beautiful buildings in the city of South Perth that, you know, like the Windsor and the Como Theatre, that we need to preserve, and I think that's something that's really, really important. But yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing from the community through advertising. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Prendeville. Anyone else who hasn't spoken who would like to speak? No. Now, Councillor Navard, this will be the longest conclusion since the start of speaking for an item ever, I think. So you have the opportunity now to sum up.
Oh, thank you, Presiding Member. Look, I would only reiterate how important it is for us to think about precincts in addition to individual properties and locations. And otherwise, I just commend the motion to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very brief. We'll now put it to the vote after it was first moved in May. Councillor Choi?
Yes, 4. Thanks, Councillor Cridland.
That makes it 7-0, which is unanimous. Thank you very much, everyone, for putting up with me for those two items. I've only got one last thing to do during my reign, and that is to say it's been a couple of hours, so we're going to have a 5-minute break. It's 7:58. Maybe we'll come back at 8:05. That's 7 minutes, actually, isn't it? And then you'll have a new presiding member at that stage. Thank you.
Thank you all. I've returned to the chair. Thank you for taking over in my absence, Councillor Cridland. We now move to the next item to be withdrawn for discussion this evening, which is item 10.3.2, Major Land Transaction, Collier Park Golf Course Submissions. The reason this has been withdrawn is an absolute majority is required. I haven't received any amended motions or alternative motions. There is an officer recommendation before us. Would someone like to move the officer recommendation? Councillor Coveney, thank you. Would someone like to second? Councillor Navard, thank you. Councillors, does anyone oppose this item? No. Councillor Choi, do you oppose this item?
No, thanks, Mr Mayor.
All right, then I'm declaring this carried unanimously using my powers under the standing orders. We move on to the next item, which is item 10.4.1, entitled, oh, sorry, my bad, 10.3.7. We did withdraw that one. So 10.3.7 is a revocation of local planning policy P350.09, significant views. Once again, there's an officer recommendation before us. I haven't received an amended motion or an alternative motion on this item. I received an alternative motion late, but I understand that's been disallowed by governance because it didn't come in on time. But well, let's start off with the officer recommendation. Does anyone wish to move the officer recommendation? I will. Does anyone wish to second it? And I'm reminding people that since nothing has been foreshadowed at this point, if it doesn't get moved and seconded, there can't be any alternate amended motions moved. Councillor Navard?
Isn't there a way that we can debate Councillor Prindiville's motion, which I think had amendment on it, but is an alternative motion?
Not while the standing orders are in effect.
Standing orders, 10.1A?
Ms Fry?
Can we, at the approval of council? Isn't that possible?
Ms Fry?
When we advised Councillor Prindiville that the alternative hadn't been received in time because it was an alternative motion, then she withdrew it. She wasn't proceeding with it, so there is no motion.
All right, so returning to item 10.3.7, I've moved it. Is anyone intending to second it? Councillor Brenda Abrandis, thank you. Does anyone oppose this item? Councillor Coveney? Okay. I certainly won't be using my powers under the standing orders if there's people opposing it. I'll reserve my comments. Councillor Brenda Abrandis, anything to say at this stage? All right. Councillor Coveney, did you wish to speak against?
Yes, please, Mr Mayor.
The floor is yours.
In my election campaign, I promised residents that I'd always vote to protect their view. Whilst I understand the administration's position that the policy in its current form is redundant, my view is that instead of getting rid of it, we should make it stronger to make it relevant. Because ultimately, in a place like South Perth, views do matter, and we have some of the best views in the world. I recall 10 years ago when I lived in an apartment building atop of the old Red Cabbage, for those people who know where that is, and my view was of Kings Park, the CBD and Burswood. Frankly, it was magical. And whilst I don't live in an apartment or have city views anymore, I can appreciate how much they mean to many of our residents. I'm sure those residents paid a pretty penny for a slice of that magic, and I fear that any threat to those views will adversely impact the price of their home and their amenity. And as I said earlier this evening about heritage, for most people their home is their nest egg, it's their retirement, it's what they've worked so hard for many years. So I respectfully submit that we must protect them, which is why I'm not in favour of this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Coveney. Councillors, is there anyone who wishes to speak in favour of the motion? No? Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in against the motion? Councillor Navard?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Our city is probably unique in the number of panoramic views and their associated amenity that are available to residents. Views across waterscapes in 3 directions with an increased number of residents occupying dwellings with river outlooks in north, east, west and southerly directions. Views across parklands with stands of trees. Views across our city and or to views to the city of Perth, so that we've got Vista Street, for example, in Kensington is not called that for no reason. It does have lovely views at various spots across it. And as well as that, we have the joy of views of lakes. These are defining factors in making our city what makes us special and a standout when it comes to residents having something lovely to look at or to visit locally. As well, these special features, which we know are expensive to maintain, allow for our income from our rates to maintain these areas of our city to a high standard because of the rentals calculated against our dwellings. Jeopardising this main area of city income jeopardising this main arrangement by not defending our significant panoramic views and the general amenity of the city could lead to a less lovely place for us all to live and lower the GRV income for applying to keeping our city in tip-top condition. Because of the overall importance of amenity and how it can be considered when it requires defending, I believe it would be wise for the council to continue to provide a policy to the CEO and city officers by retaining our existing policy for now, but replacing it in 2025 with a more comprehensive policy. So that's why I oppose removing the policy altogether. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Navard. Councillors, is there anyone who wishes to speak on the other side of the debate, which is for? Councillor, question from Councillor Brenda Abrandis. Fire away.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We've discussed this in great detail previously, but can the administration provide a bit of comfort with regard to how the R codes actually provide the guidance that would be sufficient with regard to views, and therefore the redundancy with regard to this particular local planning policy?
Thank you, Councillor Brenda Abrandis. Director Shaw.
Thank you, Mayor Milner. So the way the R codes work is effectively you have a deemed to comply pathway, and if a development meets the deemed to comply pathway in terms of its design, then it's required to be approved. So the CEO has to approve it. It's not considered by council. So in terms of building height, the R codes provide for different types of roof and a different maximum building height and maximum wall height combined to make the total building height. So that is compared against what the actual R coding of the property is. So one of the examples I think I gave last week was that if you were a property that was coded R30 to R40, which is a lot of the properties that are located along the river, the maximum building height that you could have would be 8 metres for a concealed or a skillion roof. Anything above 9 metres that's proposed, so that would vary the deemed to comply requirements, needs to be considered by council because officers don't have delegation to consider development applications that are above 9 metres in height at the moment. Where a proposal doesn't meet a deemed to comply criteria, it's then required to be assessed against the design principles and the R codes. The R codes were amended in 2021, and the design principle criteria for building heights now specifically says that we need to consider access to views of significance. So in terms of what constitutes a view of significance, the officers can obviously form an opinion and have it and can leave that quite open, which is more flexible for us in terms of application. But as detailed in the report, there were some recent State Administrative Tribunal decisions that actually expanded on that design principle assessment to actually define what constitutes a view of significance. And as part of the tribunal's findings, they considered that views to Kings Park, the Swan and Canning Rivers, parkland, areas of trees, vista corridors, etc., can all be considered panorama and views of significance that we would otherwise need to consider in our assessment. So it might be useful if I just explain how an assessment would be undertaken in the absence of a policy. we would receive the development application, and where the site was such that it could have views of significance, we would request expert modelling or a viewshed analysis as part of the development application before we formally accept it. And the policy itself provided information requirements that it was effectively saying you would need to ask for that information. We don't need that in a policy anymore because the planning regulations now prescribe that we can actually ask for that additional information and specific studies. So we would be asking for that before we even accept the application. Once the application was actually assessed, we would consider it against those deemed to comply requirements to see whether it needed to be approved or whether or not it needed that design principle assessment. Once it needed that design principle assessment, if there was any concern that the view would be obstructed, it would be open to us to engage a view impact specialist to actually determine a qualitative aspect to consider that design review principle to see whether or not the view was impacted. We could then use that to potentially refuse an application if we were concerned that the views of significance were impacted. And as I mentioned before, we now have guidance through those tribunal decisions on what actually constitutes a view. So the policy itself, from an assessment point of view, it doesn't provide the guidance, or it's not required for us to actually undertake that type of assessment anymore. It may have been in the past before the R codes were amended, but it was created under the former town planning scheme. We don't believe that it actually does what it sets out to do in the sense of protecting views. So just purely from a tidy policy framework perspective, we're recommending that we revoke it because we don't need it and it's not used.
Thank you, Director Shaw. That was pretty clear, but I suppose just for the benefit of those who might be listening and harbouring some sort of concerns, is policy P350.09 doing anything? Is it currently protecting anyone's view?
Thank you, Mayor Milner. No. And I think the community may be of the opinion that it's protecting views to the river and would otherwise stop development being built in front of properties that are currently located adjacent the river. The land adjacent those properties is reserved parks and recreation. The policy itself only applies to residential development, and you can't build residential development on land reserved parks and recreation anyway. So even if there was a development application on the foreshore, which I can't imagine that would happen because it can't happen for residential development, even if it was there, we wouldn't be able to use this policy to protect the views. So it's completely redundant.
Thank you. And without wanting to labour the point too much, if we revoke this policy, is anyone's views or amenity going to be threatened where they would have been safe otherwise if we'd retained the policy?
Thank you. No.
Thank you very much. Councillors, is there anyone who would like to speak either for or against the officer recommendation who hasn't already spoken? Councillor D'Souza.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'm speaking against. I think Council and the members of Council in 2008 who brought this policy in showed remarkable foresight in doing so because it preserves what's special about our city. Now, in terms of the recent points being made that it's potentially redundant or of no use, if that's the case, then I agree with Councillor Coveney. We should keep the policy on the books as it has been for the past 16 years. It's not going to do any harm retaining it on the books and having a review and bringing it back with a beefed up character. I think that's the appropriate view. That's my view. The amount of times I've been campaigning and doing Auckland, and I'm sure Councillor Coveney can agree. Easily the top three concerns, apart from rates and finances, is the amenity of the area and protecting character. And now that can be in the form of zoning issues and or views. So I think it's incumbent upon us as council to remember why this policy was brought in. And if it's not fit for purpose, which might well be the case because planning legislation and schemes and regulations have changed in the past 16 years, if that's not the case, there's no harm in leaving this on our books and looking at bringing back a stronger and more beefed up policy.
Thank you, Councillor D'Souza. Councillor Brenda Abrandis,
I have a question, Mr Mayor.
far away.
Thank you. Just with reference to Councillor D'Souza's comment to bringing back a policy which might be more beefed up, could the administration provide any indication as to how another policy could be more beefed up to provide any greater protection than maybe what the regulations already require? Thank you.
Thank you. Director Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Well, we wouldn't be able to, because the land in question that would otherwise be developed to obstruct views is reserved for Parks and Recreation and can't have residential development on it, and this policy applies to residential development. Any other development assessment, so for example, a residential proposal on a lot that's fronting the river and it may otherwise obstruct views to a property behind it that is also zoned residential, would be assessed against the requirements of the R codes. If it met the building height, it has to be approved. Otherwise, it would be assessed against the design principles. And as I mentioned before, that's where we would look at all of the things that part of this policy currently does anyway, because they're now contained within the codes or through those various decisions. I actually also note that this policy even says right now that we would not require an applicant to alter the building height or a roof line to protect views. So it's even more limiting than what the R codes would otherwise enable us to do, because under the current design principles, we could be requesting applicants to amend the design to maintain views of significance.
Ms. Shaw, I might ask another question. I mean, I'm picking up loud and clear that there's some councillors here that are concerned that, notwithstanding the advice that we've received, that there is some danger in revoking this policy. Is it possible that we can set up a workshop for this issue to be discussed with the councillors? I don't think that requires a motion of council. I think that can be done administratively. Is that something we might be able to facilitate? All right, great. Councillors, is there... Councillor Prendeville.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think you're right, a workshop would be very useful for us. I am not in favour of this revocation of local planning policy. Like many of us have talked about, we have extraordinary views across our city. And with the undulating land throughout, this can lead to access to a view of significance from suburbs stretching further than just South Perth itself. Views of the Perth city skyline, Swan River, lakes, parklands, even the hills. Protection of these views and the support of capturing such a view is important for our residents, not just in relation to amenity, but also to support and enhance property values. And there are 2 points in there: protecting a view and then allowing one to capture a view. I understand the R codes contain provision requiring consideration of the access to views of significance. I don't believe there's an extensive detail on how this may be considered. I think the local planning policy at a local government level exploring amenity with views of significance being one part of this would be advantageous to us and can be designed specifically for the local area, providing further consideration. And like others have said, I believe we would benefit from building on this to contain more relevant comprehensive information, including a wider interpretation of significant views as only one component. And for now, I believe we're better having something until we can have something better instead of having nothing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Prendeville. Councillor Cridland, and perhaps if you can let us know if you're speaking for or against.
Neither, Mr Mayor. What I'm doing is, in the light of having heard people speak tonight and having heard an answer, if I've understood it correctly, that the city is able to hold a workshop so that councillors can understand the position put by the city staff, subject to there being a seconder, I would move that this item be deferred to either the February or March 2025 ordinary council meeting, so a workshop can be held for the councillors to understand the relevance of a local planning policy on significant views before they vote on the item. I
Councillor
don't
Crittenden,
know
just-
if I've got a seconder in any case.
I'll check about a seconder. Just to clarify, are you proposing March for the workshop
I was proposing...
or deferring this item?
I was preferring the deferral to either March or February, whatever was more convenient for the city to have a workshop beforehand. CEO Bradford is suggesting that March might be best. In that case, I move a deferral until March so that the workshop can be held.
Yep. Now, governance, this item has been moved and seconded, and we've had people who have spoken for or against, which puts us into a pretty similar sort of situation as the one we've just finally come out of on heritage. Obviously, this meeting's being recorded. Would a deferral at this point be capable of being managed in terms of knowing where we're sitting at the March meeting? All right. And I might just... Oh, Mr Adams? Yeah.
A procedural motion to adjourn debate.
Yep. Which means there's no debate on this particular vote. Okay. I'll ask one more question before I see about a seconder for you, Councillor Cridland. Mr Adams, Ms Fry, anything that we should be aware of before I call for a seconder and then ask for the vote? Nope. Okay. On that basis, I'm happy to second Councillor Cridland's proposal. I think you've given your reason. Oh, Councillor Choi?
Yeah, sorry, I haven't had a chance to speak yet. And I'm just wondering, the deferral means that this item will come back in March or after that workshop, is that correct? Where if this is put to the vote as is, the item won't come back potentially, is that correct? That's the difference between proceeding on foot with the item and the procedural deferral motion that's now been put, is that correct?
Yeah, so Councillor Cridland has moved a procedural motion to defer. Once that is seconded, and I think Councillor Cridland has given his reasons, there is no debate and we'll simply vote on whether or not this is stalled as it is right now and then brought back to the March 2025 ordinary council meeting where we pick up from this very point, the officer recommendation having been moved and seconded and some people having spoken. If the deferral fails, and the consequence of that is the policy remains in place until the March meeting because there will have been no council motion to revoke it, that will have been carried. So is that clear so far to everyone? Yep, okay, good. Whereas if the deferral fails, we go back into debate. So I'm happy to move Councillor Cridland's motion, procedural motion, to defer this matter until the March 2025.
Second, sorry.
What did I say?
Move.
Sorry. I'm going to blame the summer cold again. Thank you, Councillor Cridland. Good pick-up. So I'm seconding Councillor Cridland's procedural motion to defer this item, to adjourn debate on this item until March 2025. Councillor Cridland is able to give his reasons for that procedural motion. He may have already done so, but I'll check after I finish talking here. But after that, there's no debate. We simply go straight to a vote as to whether or not we adjourn debate until the March 2025 ordinary council meeting. So with that, Councillor Cridland, I second your motion. Was there anything that you wish to add in terms of your reasons?
Only that a workshop will enable, hopefully, councillors and the city staff to be closer in understanding and of views in respect of the appropriateness and ability of a local planning policy to deal with significant views.
Thank you, Councillor Cridland. All right, councillors, the procedural motion has been moved, adjourning debate until the March 2025 ordinary council meeting. Councillor Cridland has given his reasons. There is no further debate on a procedural motion. I'm simply going to put the motion to adjourn debate until March 2025 ordinary council meeting to the vote. Please cast your votes. And Councillor Choi, how do you vote?
For, thank you.
All right. So The motion to adjourn debate has been carried. I was going to say who. Oh, right. Excellent. Thank you. Still getting used to the new system. All right. Those in favour were myself, Mayor Milner, Councillors Brenda Abrandis, Choi, Coveney, Cridlin, Navard and Prendeville. Those against were Councillor D'Souza. All right. We now move on to item 10.4.1, which is listing of payments, November 2024. The reason why that's been pulled out for tonight is because it's a new report. I haven't received any amended motions or alternative motions. We do have an officer recommendation before us. Would someone like to move the officer recommendation? Councillor Coveney, thank you. Someone to second? Councillor Brenda Abrandis, thank you. Councillors, does anyone oppose this? Councillor Choi, do you oppose this?
No, thank you.
All right, then I'm using my powers under the standing orders to declare that carried unanimously. Thank you all. We now move on to item 10.4.2, entitled Monthly Financial Statements, November 2024. Once again, this is a new report. That's why it's been pulled out this evening. I haven't received any alternative motions or amended motions. Once again, there is an officer recommendation before us. Would someone like to move the officer recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Brenda Abrandis, seconded by Councillor Coveney. I feel like an auctioneer. Does anyone oppose this item? Councillor Choi, do you oppose this item?
No, thanks, Mr Mayor.
Nope, then I'm declaring my powers to declare that carried unanimously. Thank you all. We move on to item 10.4.3, the City of South Perth Annual Report 2023/24. An absolute majority is required for this item, which is why it's been pulled out for consideration this evening. Once again, I haven't received any alternative motions or amended motions. We do have an officer recommendation before us. Would someone like to move the officer recommendation? Councillor Coveney, thank you. Councillor Brenda Abrandis to second, thank you. Councillors, does anyone oppose this? Councillor Choi?
No, thanks, Mr Mayor.
All right, then I'll use my powers to declare that carried unanimously. Oh, I like this part of the meeting. This is good. All right, moving on to item 10.4.4, which is proposed City of South Perth Dogs Local Law 2025. Once again, I haven't received any amended motions or alternative motions. There is an officer recommendation before us. I do see Councillor Cridlin with his hand up there. So I guess I'm going to ask him whether he wants to move it or whether he's got a question.
I don't have a question, Mr Mayor, but at the clear and present risk of being subject to more chastisement and criticism, I was going to make an oral amendment to this matter to correct what I think is an error which we can deal with quickly.
All right. Perhaps I'll give you a chance to tell council what that amendment is, and then subject to what it is, I might see if you just want to lead from that from the outset, or whether or not it's something that can be corrected from an administrative point of view.
All right. So to tell everyone what the amendment is, I would propose an amendment to the motion as published, and so everyone knows it's on page 100 of 123 in the agenda, and the amendment I would make is to subparagraph A of paragraph 1, and insert the words after Dogs Local Law 2025, the following words, with the addition of the word feces after excrete in 5.1 of the proposed City of South Perth Dogs Law.
All right, is that the only amendment?
That is the only amendment.
All right, I'll just check with Ms Fryer to see whether that can be dealt with administratively.
We can deal with it administratively, but when you actually look at, when you make the local law under the Dog Act, it specifically just references excreta. So, yeah, I'm not sure whether that would be an issue or not.
Well, I think it might, but I'm not sure I can give my reasons before I've got a seconder, that's all.
All right. Well, let's go through the process. Maybe I'll ask Ms Fry and Mr Adams as to whether this is something that can be done administratively or whether or not we should go through the usual process of moving a motion, seconding it. All right, we're going to sidebar for a moment. Bear with us for a moment, folks. All right, so received confirmation that we can deal with that one administratively. In that case, Councillor Cridland, I assume there's no need for an amended motion?
Well, subject to the word faeces turning up in the published dogs local law, yes. And if that's the case, I'll move it unamended.
All right. Would anyone like to second the officer recommendation? Councillor Coveney, thank you. Councillors, does anyone oppose this item? Councillor Choi, do you oppose?
No, thanks, Mr Mayor.
Yeah, can I speak on this so people actually understand why I'm putting faeces in there?
I'll allow it.
All right.
Just bear in mind that this is the last substantive item of the year, and well, anyway, you get the idea. Far away.
I think it's important we talk about dog faeces.
Of course.
And the reason I do is because the Dog Act, as Ms Fry correctly says, talks about local governments having the ability to make local laws in respect of excreta. Excreta's not defined, so it has its normal meaning. Excreta means dogs doing wee-wees, dogs marking trees, fire hydrants, legs, all that sort of stuff. And the new dogs local law has significant penalties, $1,000. And the only time you're not subject to a $1,000 fine is when you go and collect the excreta. So people have absolutely no ability to pick up a dog's wee-wee or to pick up when a dog marks the 50 times it goes around every tree down at Collier Reserve. What we really want to stop is people who leave their German Shepherd, do a huge, big dog faeces in the park because that's bad for kids' sport and all that sort of stuff. There's nothing we can do about the other, and we should just make sure that we're not accidentally making that a $1,000 penalty as well. So that's why faeces needs to be put in there so that it's only that part of excreta that's covered because excreta covers sweat, marking, hormones, all of those things. That's why I wanted it inserted, because I've got a dog.
Thank you for the clarification, Councillor Cridland. And
it does all those things.
Never let it be said that local government meetings aren't interesting, folks. Councillor Coveney, anything to say as seconder? No. Councillors, does anyone oppose this? Councillor Choi?
No, thanks, Mr Mayor.
All right, then I will use my powers to declare it carried unanimously. Thank you all. Okay, that brings us to item 11, which is applications for a leave of absence. Does anyone have any leave of absence applications they'd like to submit? Councillor Coveney?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like a leave of absence from the 26th of December to the 4th of January. I got jealous of everyone taking leave at the last meeting, so I've now booked a holiday.
All right, so that was the 26th of December through to?
The 4th of January.
4th of January, okay, thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Choi?
No, I'm officially away on holiday already, thanks, Mr Mayor.
All right. Well, in that case, I'll call for someone to move a motion that the leave of absence application received from Councillor Nick Coveney for the period of 26 December 2024 to 4 January 2025, inclusive, be granted. Could I have a mover? Councillor Brenda Abrandis, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Prendiville, thank you. Does anyone oppose this? Councillor Choi?
No, thank you.
All right, then that's carried. That brings us to item 12, which is motions of which previous notice has been given. That's nil. Item 13 is questions from members. Item 13.1 is responses to previous questions from members taken on notice. That's nil. Item 13.2 is questions from members. Are there any questions from members this evening? Councillor Prendeville.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not so much of a, well, maybe I'll form it into a question, but I was at the Christmas carols on Sunday evening, and I'd be really interested to know the crowd number. And as a little extra, I thought it was a fantastic event. It was run really well. We loved it. There was activities for the kids, and the singing was amazing. The location was amazing. So I just wanted to mention that to Council and Administration, that it was a fantastic event. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms Shaw, I know it was a big crowd. Do we have the numbers on hand, or should we take that on notice?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the feedback. I'll pass that on to the team. Anecdotally, talking to the team, they thought that there may be 2,000 to 3,000 people there, but we will get the final figures.
Thank you so much. Councillors, any further questions for administration this evening? Councillor Navard?
Mr. Mayor, look, I was just wondering if I could explain myself. I had sent some questions through to city officers, and I just thought, oh, the last thing we need is more questions tonight, and I'd be very happy to carry them through to February, acknowledging that I really appreciated the answers I received. So that's all.
Thank you, Councillor Navard. Councillor Choi, any questions for the administration?
Yes, I have a couple. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Fire away.
The first one is whether the city can please provide an update on the completion date for the South Perth Underground Power Project, as I believe it was communicated a little while ago that it was due to be completed by the end of this month. So I'm not sure if that's still the case.
Ms Anne Primo, should I send that to you?
Yeah, I'll take that on notice.
Thank you. And another question, Councillor Choi?
Yes, thanks again, Mr. Mayor, and to Director Anne Primo. Now, I also understand that the Angela Street Parklet is subject to a proposed 3-year licence near the end of its 12-month trial, as currently open for public comment on the City's Your Say page. I'm just wondering what happened to the evaluation process of the trial in the first instance, pursuant to the December 2023 Council endorsement, and what types of questions are being asked to assess both its impact and benefits versus visual amenity and loss of the car base, please, as part of the current Your Say consultation process.
Thank you. Ms Shaw?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the city had discussions with the owner, who earlier this month advised that they were seeking to renew the licence. They've sought approval for a 3-year licence term in lieu of the 1 year that's otherwise provided for under the local law. So following receiving that advice, we have put the proposal out for public consultation. The feedback that we're seeking in terms of the consultation is just whether or not the community members support or do not support the parklet in its proposed location. The city will separately be preparing an analysis in terms of any complaints that had been received during the trial period for the 12 months, any impacts on car parking sightlines, and assessing the proposal in relation to the alfresco dining and parklet policy that Council had adopted after the decision was made to grant the licence in December next year. So we're intending on bringing a report back to Council for Council to consider whether or not it grants a 3-year licence at the February 2025 meeting.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Any further questions, Councillor Choi?
Yes, my last one is a Christmas one. You'll be happy to hear, Mr. Mayor, and thanks to Director Shaw for the response to that previous question. Look, a resident has advised me that, and I'm not currently there in Perth at the moment, so I couldn't check this out for myself, but has advised me that the Christmas tree on the Coos Street foreshore is missing its star, and I was just wondering whether the city intends to put a star on top of that decorated tree.
Ms Anne Primo, are you in charge of Christmas stars?
Yeah, so the lights have been installed, and I'm going to guess here at the answer, but I think the tree has probably outgrown the height of being able to put the star on top. And I actually think it possibly wasn't there last year, but I might be wrong on that. But the same issue that we've got with the one at the old mill, where we can no longer, the tree has outgrown the height at which we can access it.
Thank you, Ms Ampremo. Councillors, any further questions for the administration this evening? Councillor Cridland.
Nothing more on dog faeces, but I did go down to Godwin Sump to have a look at it, and it was excellent. And I took my dog down, and the new dog watering facility wasn't working, so I'm just wondering if someone could just have a check on that. I was going to put in a report, but I forgot about it until you mentioned Godwin Sump tonight in your report, Mr Mayor. That's probably not a question, really, is it? Next question is there any information available to councillors on the number of city employees and contract staff and the trends or changes from year to year? And where would I look for that?
Mr Adams, should I send that in your direction?
Yeah, we normally provide that around budget time. We can provide you whatever your questions are. You can send them straight through to us. We can provide you the answers with, whether it's full-time equivalents, part-time staff, whatever breakup you want to look at it in.
Thank you. A final question is, I can remember maybe a dozen years ago, the city dealing with the state in respect of the South Perth train station. Noting that we are in an election period, I was wondering if either of the major parties had given any commitments or indications as to whether the South Perth train station was ever going to happen, and if so, when.
Who should I send that to? Mr Bradford?
When we have met with representatives of both parties, then we have highlighted public transport and discussed the South Perth train station, noting that the city believes it's important and would advocate for it. It hasn't been an immediate priority for the state to date, but I think the local member may have made a comment on the Mayor's Facebook post around the government will get to South Perth train station after the Canning Bridge bus interchange. Now, that doesn't have a date or anything associated with it, and that's about the extent of information I've got.
I can confirm that. I'm happy to track down that post and read it if you'd like, Councillor Cridland.
As long as that's an accurate summary, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, sounded pretty accurate. Okay. Any further questions, councillors? All right. In that case, that brings us to item 14, which is new business of an urgent nature introduced by decision of the meeting. That's nil. Item 15 is meeting closed to the public, which is ordinarily when we would close the meeting to the public if there was any reason for us to do so, but there's not, so we won't. Which brings us to item 16, closure. Before I close this meeting, I'd like to thank everyone for their attendance and participation. On behalf of the City of South Perth, I'd like to wish everyone in our community a very, very Merry Christmas filled with love, laughter, family and friends, and a happy, healthy and prosperous 2025. Merry Christmas, everyone. I declare this meeting closed at 8:49 p.m. Thank you all and good night.